Hey, good morning, everybody. It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I am back coming off a 2-hour show last night over on the 11th House channel. And we covered a lot of ground, a lot of territory. And if you have any interest in the roots of communism and the astrological paradigm that we're currently in right now, you may want to check it out. And because there's a lot of connections there with Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto, Saturn in Pisces, which we are approaching in 3 years' time. The groundwork for all this stuff usually takes place with Saturn in Aquarius, which is where we are now. And then we move into this other phase, this kind of dissolution of structures, structures being the hierarchies that are concurrent with the time. So let's do a little roll call here. We got Miss Susie Escobar. What's going on, Sue? Miranda Couch, president accounted for. Andrea Garland in the house. There are the Crimmies. You have been unblocked. Steve butt blocked himself last night. Steve self-censored last night. I think some of that white guilt was coming through. Susan Cano in the house. There's Lils. T. Jordan. Hello, Thomas. Good to see you. Let's see. Laura D. What's going on, Laura? Ren Star. What's going on, Rennie? Nice to see you. There's Michael Pafford. Hello, Michael. Let's see. The Mia-wigical Catacorn. President accounted for. There she is, Jennifer Fitzgerald. What's going on, Jennifer? My neighbor from the north. Leon Luis checking in from Nottingham. Jolly old Nottingham. Let's see, who else do we have here? Taffy Polensky. What's going on, Taffy? The Techno Brat is in the house. What's going on, Emily? Good to see you. Let's see. Pam Jerome. Probably freezing her. A little took us off up there in Michigan. What's going on, Pam? Now, Lynn on the other side of the equation is probably nice and warm. Hello, Lynn. Good to see you. Donna Sullivan. Great to see you, Donna. Glad you could make it today. Let's see. Leslie's here. MK, good morning. Charles Mazak, JMP Love, Jen S, Laurel Jubin, Cindy. We got an all-star lineup here this morning. Let me tell you. Chatlandia representing. Last night's charts were interesting. Yes, they were, weren't they? I'm going to talk about another aspect to last night's show that I didn't cover, and it's actually quite an interesting one, and also has some Mercury kind of retrograding ramifications for the time that we're in right now. So I'm going to get into that a little bit today. Le Gitan. Great service you're providing of late. Service are us. By the way, I want to do a shout out to Bridie, also in Nottingham. And some of you are familiar with Bridie and Bridie's work. If you're not, let me see if I can find her LinkedIn page here. Because I had a session with her yesterday, and boy, was it something else, man. It was really a great session. Let me see if I can find her and put her link in chat. Let's see, there we go. Let me see. I'll try to get in so I can pull her LinkedIn profile up. She's amazing. Some of you guys know her and know her work. And she, like I said, did a session with me yesterday. Pretty tremendous stuff. Let me see what we got here. There we go. And let me find her. Let me put her link in here. Highly, highly, highly recommend her. She does incredibly deep healing work at a level that I'm not sure I've encountered with other people. There you go. I just put her link in there. So anyway, it was a good session yesterday with her. And she's worth the effort to track down, let me tell you. Who else do we have? Dr. Laura Wilson. Hello, Dr. Laura Wilson. H. Suttles, Half Q, Sabrina C. There she is, Christine Mose. What's going on? Christine Tina Zurin. I miss Nick Plur. We all do. Misty Miner, still hanging in there. There's Tamara. Hello, Tamara. Beth Berry just got the notification. There's Ryan. What's going on, right? W.C. Ray. Right. The Bodhi abides. Lisa Dawn T. Seguin. Tondar. All right. There's Tizia from the Houston area. What's going on, Tizia? So anyway, we had a good show last night. I'm going to kind of go back in time to another part of the show that I wanted to talk about, but didn't really get a chance to cover, mainly because of time restraints. I'm trying to keep the Sunday night shows 2.5 hours and less, because I think I've got the sort of the most impact when I'm in that 2.5 hours zone. 3 hours, things start to trail off a little bit. So, but there is something that I also want to kind of go back in time and look, since we're in a Mercury retrograde, it's kind of good to do that. I want to go back in time and encapsulate theoretically how the 2020 election was stolen. Okay. Now, Time Magazine has come out and said that there was an effort, a concerted effort, to tilt the results in a certain direction for the good of the people. That came out the same day that Mike Lindell, who I want to talk about a little bit today as well, that Mike Lindell brought out the proof that Dominion was doing fucky with the servers and the voting machines. And one of these days I got to get Laura Presley on the show, because Laura, and I've talked about her before, Laura actually had an election stolen from her in Austin, and she fought the results because she found out that there were, there were incongruities and improprieties, all kinds of just high strange with the computers in her district in Austin. And I've told the story before. She lost 2 times in court. Every time she lost, she had more fees piled on top of her, so that going to the next level in terms of seeking justice, the stakes were raised. So by the time she got to her first appeal, she'd already lost her first case. She got to her first appeal and she lost that one. So she had fees piled on top of both of those trials. And then she finally went to the Texas State Supreme Court and she won. And indeed, yes, there were improprieties in the voting software. So I'd love to have her on the show because, number one, she knows this stuff inside and out. And number two, she actually was somebody who proved her case and won. So I'm going to try to get her on the show. She's super, super busy, but we do have a connection with her here in Fredericksburg. She's also been involved in the suit against the city with the vote here when we had the fluoride initiative, which now looking back on it was totally rigged. It was totally. So since we're in a Mercury retrograde phase, all right, let me do the invocation here, and then we'll sort of set the stage, and I'll tell you kind of what happened during that time and why I do think it's important to talk about this. All right, here we go. Blessed and Holy Mother, Father God, of the great central sun, within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, and all the great avatars who have walked through this third dimensional paradigm. We ask that only the highest and best information, wisdom, and truth come through this channel for everyone at this time. And in so doing, we affirm and decree that we are free, that we are abundant, that we are powerful, that we are creative, that we are imaginative, that we are loving, and that we are sovereign. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed at this time. Okay, let's get going. So let's go back in time. It is the day of the election here in Fredericksburg, special election for our anti-fluoride campaign. Even though it was quite informal, we had people stationed at the various, polling places. And I would say that the number of people that were anti-fluoride based on our conversations with people coming out was pretty good. Like, I was like, wow, because, we're all sort of, we had people, I think there were at least 4 polling places in the city. And so we had people outside of each of those polling places and just kind of getting the pulse. And the feeling was, it was very anti-fluoride, pro clean water. That was the feeling. So I felt okay about it. It was like, I was really trying to hedge my bets, but some weird things happened. Somewhere at some point during the day, they had to call for more ballots. It's like, wow, why are they doing that? Why are they calling for more ballots? What's going on here? It felt strange. It was just one of those kind of moments, right? It's like, it felt strange. And then that night, like I said, that night when I went to bed, after, busting my ass for 6 months with this thing and putting in a lot of time and effort and having a lot of support from you guys. Judy Anderson, bless her heart, she donated a couple times to the campaign. Love you, Judy. And I went to bed that night feeling really uneasy. It was the same feeling I had on election night on the 6th of November. Without any results, I felt uneasy. And I just had this feeling in the morning that when I woke up, it was not going to, when I woke up, I just knew that the news wasn't going to be good. And of course, it wasn't good. So the amount that we lost by was tremendous. It wasn't even close. And that really didn't reflect the sort of the informal kind of polling that was taking place, at the various places where people were voting. So one of the things that happened is that, of course, we were involved in also the observing of the vote, which they made it very difficult to do. We had to stand inside these little boxes 6 feet away. They made it really, really difficult. Long story short, we found improprieties, and enough improprieties to make a difference, that there were at least 500 votes that had no chain of custody whatsoever. And 500 votes in a town like this for an election like this is substantial. So as a result of that, we wound up suing the city. And we're still involved in a lawsuit with the city. And I think the hang up there is that, I'm not part of the lawsuit, but there's a need for enough money to, seal the deal, pay the lawyers, and we're getting a lot of their work done at kind of a reduced rate. I think we're about 20 grand. I think we're about 18 grand away or something like that. But as a result of that suit, the mayor in the city stepped down. She stepped down, and she was named as a main person in the suit. So anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was kind of a microcosm that happened at a macrocosmic level. And Mike Lindell is threatening now to sue Dominion. Let's bring this up here. Mike Lindell's a fucking bulldog. I like this guy. There are a lot of people don't like him. I like him. He's a bulldog. How many times did the guy die? Like 14 or something like that. CD Media, whatever this website is. Let's see, here we go. Mike Lindell threatens to sue Dominion. MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell threatens to sue Dominion and Smartmatic for crimes against our country if they do not come out with proof. CD Media is having to harden our servers. Okay. So what do we have here? Is this a video? If I'm gonna play the video, then I have to activate the audio. So give me 1 second here. Let me go back and activate the audio. I thought it was just a piece of text that I'd be reading. So I guess he's on Bannon's War Room. Let's play this video. Let's see what Mr. Pillow has to say.
Dominion has not sued me. I don't even think they've threatened to sue me. They send me letters like, Mike, in your documentary, if you have these people in there, this isn't real. Let us know who's going to be in your documentary. So my reach out is, and then I got the other letter that said, you have been warned, you know, like some mafia letter from back when I was a kid. You know, so they haven't sued me, Steve. Here's the deal. I will take them. You're exactly right. Bring the media there. I don't care how long. I'll sit there for a week with you. We'll do it every day. We'll make it like a little trial thing. Because if you don't, let me tell you what I'm doing. I am going after Dominion and Smartmatic. I'm going after them with a lawsuit. If this doesn't all come out to the public and they all get exposed and show what happened in our election, because it's going to get out there. Or my next step is I sue Dominion. And when I sue Dominion, then it has to come out in court. And I'll make sure that that's public. So either do it now or let's just do it now and save time. How about it, Dominion? How about it?
So can I ask you, Mike, what grounds would you sue Dominion and Smartmatic on? You say you're going to sue them. What grounds? We got about a minute, and then we'll hold you over the break. What grounds would you sue them on?
I guess, you know, I don't know that yet, but it'd be crimes against our country that they use lies. You know, their machines were all online. We've got them saying that they don't go online, and it's right in their manual that they go online. We've got proof that they were online. We've got all the evidence. So it would be, you know, I don't know I actually have lawyers looking at that right now. What can be charged? In fact, Steve, the next time I'm on your show, I guarantee I'll have those charges against Dominion. Dominion has not.
So, Mike Lindell, you got to know your case, brother. Like when you hold on a second. If you're gonna get out there, you gotta know what you're gonna sue these people for, and I think he knows that. But the thing I love about Mike Lindell's, you know, he's a cancer. He's got those claws. He's got those claws in this situation. I think he needs to be careful. I hope he's got good security. I know he's a devout Christian. The guy's fearless. I mean, how many times has he died? The guy's absolutely fearless. So I think these are all interesting developments. Whether you believe he'll be able to prove it or not, I think, you know, we're looking for inspirational things in our lives. And how could this not be inspirational? This guy is not giving up. There are other people who have thrown in the towel, have walked away. Mike Lindell has not. Mike Lindell is going to hold on to this thing until he sees it all the way through, or they kill him. One of the two. And he needs to be careful because they don't like people like Mike Lindell. And I think he's born in 1961, which makes him, he's not a boomer. He's a Generation Jones person, like yours truly. Yeah. June 28th, 1961. So he's a cancer, very early cancer. Let's see, what does this chart look like? There is no chart for Mike Lindell. That's interesting. I'll have to do one. I mean, he's not even an Astro theme. And usually Astro theme has just about everybody. Let me just do this quickly. Let me just do a quick glance at June 28, 1960. I'm pretty familiar with where the planets were at that time. Let's see here what we got. June 28th. So we've got the Sun in Cancer, Moon in Sagittarius. Looks like Moon in Sagittarius. That makes sense. Mercury. He's got Mercury retrograde. I mean, this is a really good example of Mercury retrograde. The guy is going backwards in time to try to unearth something. And he has Mercury in Cancer. He's got his claws into this thing. He has Venus in Taurus, which for a pillow maker, I think is pretty good. And he's going to have this Venus-Mars conjunction in the next couple of days. Wow, that'll be interesting. He has Mars in Leo, 29 degrees Leo. So anaretic degree in Leo. That puts his Mars right on Trump's ascendant. He and Donald Trump have Mars at right around the same degree. He's got his Jupiter return. He's going through that right now. He has Jupiter in Aquarius retrograde. Saturn in late Capricorn. So he's just coming through. He just came through his Saturn return. Let's see. He's got a Uranus-Mars conjunction in his in his chart. Wow. Let me just make sure that's correct. It is correct. Uranus-Mars conjunction. It's pretty close degrees. Let me see. 29, 23. That's a good conjunction. That's a good. He's rebellious, right? Mars-Uranus conjunction, but it's for a good cause. It's opening his heart. Let's see what else we have here. Neptune in Scorpio. We know that. And Pluto in Virgo. Yes, we know that. And then the true node is in Leo. So he's got the true node conjunct his Mars. Oh, this guy's a fighter. He's a total fighter. Mike Lindell, you go. You go, brother. Interesting chart. Maybe I'll look at it more on Sunday night. Anyway, no matter how you feel or what you feel about the election, you have to admire the guy's tenacity here. Everybody else has folded up and walked away, and he hasn't. He hasn't. That's inspirational. If you could apply that kind of tenacity to your own life and solving your own problems or working through things without any kind of derivation or distraction, we could all accomplish a lot. So, Mike Lindell, you keep going. All right. I wanted to talk about, speaking of Mercury retrograde, I was thinking about this. And I was thinking about how we got to the 2020 election. We got to the 2020 election in 2018 with the midterms. And I think that's where things really begin to pivot, and pivot for the Democrats and pivot for their continued assault on the presidency and ultimately impeachment. So why are the 2018 midterms important? Well, the 2018 midterms are important because that's when the Republicans lost the House. And once they lost the House, then impeachment was on, because a Republican House would not have worked assiduously to impeach Trump. They wouldn't have been able to do it. There was still too much pressure on the Republican Party to kind of toe the line and support the president. That would evaporate in about a year's time. But at that point, there was still this sense that they were going to kind of hold things together. Lindsey Graham had been liberated from his handler, John McCain, seemed to have been more in Trump's camp after that. Yertle the Turtle was still kind of towing the line. Trump had employed his wife. So there's some, I guess, good feeling and support there. So when the 2018 elections, the midterms happened, there clearly were a number of races that got flipped kind of at the last minute. Just, a mini snapshot of what would happen in 2020. So they wound up taking they being the Democrats, wound up taking the House. Vote-wise, it's kind of an important detail. Now, what happens after that is really critical and important. Let me show you what they did. The Democrats hired this guy, probably one of the most dangerous men in America. His name is Norm Eisen. Some of you have heard about him, and he's been featured at times on Tucker Carlson. So what they did in 2019 is they hired Norm Eisen as a consultant. Let me just read you the first sentence here. Norman L. Eisen, born November 11th, 1960. He's got those slitty Scorpio eyes. You see that? This is classic Scorpio. Not Scorpio rising, but Scorpio. A lot of Scorpios have these kind of slitty eyes. Is an American attorney, author, and former diplomat. He served as counsel for the Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee during the impeachment process of Donald Trump in 2020. He's a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution. He served as White House counsel for ethics and government reform. That's basically code for regime change. United States ambassador to the Czech Republic and board chair of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, Washington crew. He is the author of The Last Palace, Europe's Turbulent Century in 5 Lives in One Legendary House. So Norm Eisen was the architect of the impeachment process. Norm Eisen does not get hired unless the Democrats have a majority in the House. And then once they do, this guy is a career political assassin. Looks like he was born in LA. He worked in his parents' hamburger stand. I guess he's a self-made man. So Eisen is the guy who is now embedded also in the Biden administration. He's a political hitman. And it was Norm Eisen who was the architect of the impeachment process. Now, what's interesting is that they are not able to hire him unless they have a Democratic majority, right? So they did have a Democratic majority. They hire Eisen, and they move forward with the impeachment proceedings, which, by the way, are really just an inversion of what Trump and Giuliani and the White House was uncovering about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in Ukraine. And they knew that. They knew that that was happening. And how did they know it was happening? Because there were leaks in the White House. They knew what they were going after. And that trickled back to them. And of course, now they had a strategy. The strategy is, let's turn this around. Let's create something with Trump. Let's have this fake fucking impeachment, and let's bring out these people who will bear false witness, which is exactly what they did. And because they had the majority again, they impeached him. And the Senate at that time was going to be supportive. And of course, we had Bill Barr on the scene to manage that for Trump. And so he, was impeached by the House, not by the Senate. But that took up a huge amount of time and a significant distraction and a huge amount of resources. And while they were doing that, they were also working on COVID-19 and the so-called virus. That was the next step in the demolition of Donald J. Trump. When Kennedy was assassinated, they were not going to let him get out of Dealey Plaza. If that moment with the magic bullets didn't work, there were other things that were supposed to happen. to Kennedy that day. And one of the things, I mean, in just right after those, like supposedly the last resort was that the car was going to explode. Like Kennedy was not making it out of Dealey Plaza that day. And it's the same kind of psychology that was applied to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was not going to be allowed to be reelected, that they were going to use everything in their power in order to stifle that. And Norm Eisen and the impeachment process was really another step. It was another stage. And while they're doing that, they're loading, they're having a viral load, right? Everything's being put into place. You know, there were test kits that were ordered for COVID-19 in 2018. That's how far back they knew that this thing was going to go down. So even if Trump had survived the impeachment, which he did, they had another kind of cataclysmic event waiting for him. And that's what happened. So Norm Eisen right now is embedded in the Biden presidency, whatever that thing is. And we're still sort of scratching our heads and trying to wrap our heads around the reality or the surreality of him being there at this moment in time. And trying to, again, feel into the so-called reality of the situation, which feels very unreal. We talked about that last night on the show. And I think that there's even a strategy around that, about feeling unreal, that we're living in this strange kind of simulation, which in some ways we are. We are living in a very, very unusual simulation. Emily and I have been talking about that off and on, and she does a lot of work in this area with some other people like Michael Wan, where this so-called reality is not really what it appears to be. And we've known that for a while now. At least theoretically we've known that, but it's feeling even kind of more fleshed out, where you see cracks in the walls, between these, looks like set pieces, when Biden is sitting down and having a very important meeting with Kamala and Nancy Pelosi. There are literally cracks in the walls. But that's a metaphor for where we are, the crack in the wall of our own reality at this time. And I think there's something interesting and empowering there, that if reality is that plastic and that fluid, then what can you do with it? How can you play with reality in that way? And I think that there are certain rules in play. I do. I don't believe that people should be harming other people. I mean, I think that is a clear-cut kind of boundary. At the same time, you should be able to defend your territory, and you should be able to vigorously defend your territory and your loved ones and the things that you work hard for to have in your life. Those things are, I think, important, and that is an unassailable right. And outside of that, I think everything is kind of up for grabs in terms of how we navigate and how we can, essentially blink in and out of 3D reality, and even work with things like the law of attraction and manifestation, and these are spiritual principles that connect us up into sort of these higher relationships, or relationships with higher dimensions. And if we're gonna get through this, this is where we have to go ultimately. Because if we continue to slog through this in 3D, I mean, we'll have rings through our noses and chains on the other side of it. So, we have to find ways, each and every one of us, to circumnavigate this at a higher level, and at a quantum level, actually. And I think that that's available as reality becomes kind of looser and less definable. Those kinds of qualities, those kinds of potentialities are kind of more tangible in some ways. So try not to get locked in on this, common narrative or this narrative that they want to feed everybody. Try not to get too locked in on that, because ultimately they will bind you with that. So we have to move through that and then kind of see it for what it is, and then continue to understand that we can have a higher relationship with our spirit. And that's where we all need to go. And if we can do that together in our own individual ways, then we have a much better chance of not only navigating through this reality, but creating a different kind of reality. And we're at the precipice in a way that we've never been at before. We've gone through periods of reset and change. And last night, if you go back to last night's show, you can see I gave you 3 examples. You had the creation of the Communist Manifesto, and that was through the League of the Just, and which becomes ultimately the Communist Party of Europe. That was one period and change of socioeconomic and political reset that was being put into play. The New Deal, which happens with Saturn and Aquarius and then gets executed really through Saturn and Pisces, the Great Society with Lyndon Johnson, and it gets hatched in Saturn and Aquarius and executed in Saturn and Pisces. So we have seen this before, right? We've seen these moments in time before, and we're kind of at one of those moments now. The difference is that during those previous periods, people were not as switched on and awake. So we are the X factor now. And it doesn't matter whether they're trying to, scapegoat people that are QAnon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a minor part of the narrative in some ways. They're always looking for scapegoats. We even have to get beyond that. If we can get beyond that, we can, and we can really kind of free our minds here. Then we have the ability to do something different. And I think the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the great conjunction, is the wild part of all this. Let's do a little more Mercury retrograde. I want to go back in time, and it goes back to the Great Society. Now, what's interesting is that when things happen, that there can be some unintended consequences, both positively and negatively. So I'm going to show you something that happened during the formation of the Great Society, and that had an unintended consequence, which actually is a big part of where we are now. Since we're in a Mercury retrograde period, let's check it out. The Naked Society. Vance Packard was a really interesting writer. He was one of these writers that was kind of an early version of a whistleblower. And he was way ahead of the curve. And he talked about things like the robot prosumer, modern day technology, participatory culture. And the stuff that he wrote about was later turned into science fiction novels. It was a very interesting character. So he talked about and wrote about the Naked Society. So what is the Naked Society? The Naked Society is a book that he wrote about data gathering and information gathering. Let's read this a little bit. It's a really interesting bit of culture that's important and then winds up having unintended consequences. So The Naked Society is a 1964 book on privacy by Vance Packard. The book argues that changes in technology are encroaching on privacy. Now look at that. This is 1964. It could create a society in the future with radically different privacy standards. Now, part of the Great Society was Johnson's initiative to gather as much information from consumers. And that was through the government. This was a sneaky attempt on Johnson's part to grab as much information and basically sell it off. I mean, this is where we begin to see kind of Big Brother really stick its toes into the water here. Packard criticized advertisers' unfettered use of private information to create marketing schemes. He compared a recent Great Society initiative by then President Lyndon B. Johnson, the National Data Bank. That's what Johnson was trying to sneak through. He was trying to create this national data bank, which they would collate and aggregate all this consumer data, and then they would use it however they saw fit. To the use of information by advertisers and argued for increased data privacy, measures to ensure that information did not find its way into the wrong hands. The essay led Congress to create the special subcommittee on the invasion of privacy and inspired privacy advocates such as Neil Gallagher, who's a lefty, he's a Democrat, and then Sam Ervin, who's on the right, to fight Johnson's flagrant disregard for consumer privacy. Ervin criticized Johnson's invasive domestic agenda and saw the unfiltered database of consumers' information as a sign of a presidential abuse of power. Ervin warned that the computer never forgets. It was the first book to raise the question of how technological change is making observation of individuals' lives, tastes, opinions, and actions easier to observe and monitor. It argues that privacy is worth defending. The technologies of concern at the time were such things as hidden microphones, concealed cameras, and the polygraph lie detector. You know what's interesting is right around this time, Candid Camera, the TV show Candid Camera, becomes quite popular. And they being Alan Funt and who's the other guy? Durward Kirby. Durward Kirby and Alan Funt were making fun of people. Like this was, they had the live studio audience, they had the canned laugh track, and they would basically have these hidden cameras and they would trick people. And really what they were doing is they were getting people used to being filmed and photographed in public. Like this idea of the panoptical society was being introduced. And again, the hidden in plain sight messaging around this is that, isn't this funny? Aren't people foolish or cute or ingenious or stupid, right? And this is happening right around the same time. I believe Candid Camera really takes off around 1965, 64, 65, 66. Yeah. So technology is concerned. Okay, so we have in the polygraph lie detector. The likely snoopers were seen as the state, big business, and education. One reviewer summarized the book by saying that it is concerned with the peeping tomfoolery which is going on today in the various ways in which we are exposed and thereby victimized. So Vance Packard was way ahead of the curve. And he came up with the title of this book, The Naked Society, as a sort of countermeasure for Johnson's Great Society. Now, what happened is that the National Data Bank never made it into that huge, huge piece of legislation. The Great Society, the war on poverty, all the stuff that sets up this Leviathan of the welfare state under Johnson. That part didn't make it. Now, what happens as a result of that is that now, since the government theoretically is not involved in the collection of data for individuals, guess who gets that opportunity? Private business. So essentially what they did is say, okay, we're not going to allow the government to do this theoretically. It's off limits. But we're going to allow the private industry or private business or the private sector in order to do that and able to do that. And the government can contract with them. And that's exactly what happened. Hence, we have things like Facebook and Google, both of which are outgrowths of government programs. So the unintended consequences, let's say, for instance, Packard doesn't write the book, and the government then has the ability to collate that data, to collect and collate that data. Theoretically, there can be more transparency, again, theoretically, because we have a relationship with the so-called government. And I'm not saying that this would have happened. I'm saying could have happened. But we don't have that relationship with Facebook. We don't have that relationship with Google. We don't have that relationship with this medium. So therefore, that transparency is really never going to happen. Could it have happened if the government was in charge of it? Possibly. Possibly. That said, they're basically doing everything in their power now that for whatever kind of access we have, they're going to do everything in their power to even limit that at a governmental level. I think they're working on eliminating the FOIA stuff. And I don't have it in front of me, but I heard it over the weekend. So maybe tomorrow I'll follow up on that. But it's interesting, right? It's interesting that these are sometimes the unintended consequences. And Packard was great. He basically stopped a certain part of, what they want to hide inside of this idea of the Great Society. But they always find workarounds, don't they? Always. What else did I want to talk about today? So this is a Mercury retrograde. Let's go back and revisit the reverse martyr, also known as Brian Sicknick. Apparently now, Brian Sicknick did not die that the way he was portrayed as dying by the quote-unquote mass media. Some new things have come to light, and CNN has now quietly had to admit that this man's demise may not necessarily be true, or at least the way it was reported. So let's read this a little bit here. CNN quietly snuck out a report this week without posting the story to their homepage and barely covering the news on air. It suggests that despite the multitude of claims since January 6th, Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick was not killed, not capital, by blunt force trauma. The CNN's news story was not shared by any of their leading personalities, reporters, or anchors. The eighth paragraph of the story emphasis added, according to one law enforcement official, medical examiners did not find the signs that the officer sustained any blunt force trauma. So investigators believe that early reports that he was fatally struck by a fire extinguisher are not true. One possibility being considered by investigators is that Sicknick became ill after interacting with a chemical irritant like pepper spray or bear spray that was deployed in the crowd. But investigators reviewing video of the officer's time around the Capitol haven't been able to confirm that in tape that has been recovered so far, the officials said. The case could also be complicated if Sicknick had a pre-existing medical condition. Despite dozens of results for CNN mentioning the fire extinguisher, there are just two correcting the record since their report was released. The network has repeatedly claimed without evidence that Officer Brian Sicknick was definitely killed by Trump supporters with a fire extinguisher. So Maxine Waters wants Trump arraigning for accessory murder. It's just patently false. A Capitol Police officer was beaten reportedly with a fire extinguisher. That's what Anderson Pooper had to say. Ann Cabrera stated Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the hours-long attack. That's a very Chiron and Aries kind of thing, isn't it? Chiron Aries being the head, law enforcement, of course. Aaron Burnett asked, why is Trump trying so hard to make those claims the focal point of the Senate trial? Charges him with inciting insurrection. Does he think that the lie would justify a mob of his supporters trampling a woman? Is she referring to Ashley Babbitt? She better be careful with that. That's opening a can of worms. Does it justify police officers being hit, beaten with a hockey stick and crutch? Does he think Brian Sicknick working the Capitol that died after the hit in the head with a fire extinguisher? Well, he didn't die. And by the way, how many of those people were actually officers? Question mark. Yeah. Question mark. Not as many as you would think. Wolf Blitzer allowed Representative Ted Lieu, to assert unchallenged this was an insurrection, an attempted coup where multiple people died, including a law enforcement officer that reportedly was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher. So this is all bullshit, okay? It's all bullshit. I guess this is Raheem Kassem's website. I like this guy. He's actually pretty smart. It's all bullshit, and it's the Ministry of Lies. And they're just going to continue to feed these lies, distortions of the truth, with no checks, no balances, completely unfettered, and until people, buy into it, which at this point in time is quite easy, because now you have a populace who is basically suffering from long-term hypoxia and oxygen deprivation, so they can't even really think for themselves anymore. So, okay, yeah, that sounds true. Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did this, right? They did this. And the insurrection is just it's such a clown show. It's such a production. It's almost insulting that they're calling that thing an insurrection. Like, if there was a real insurrection, I'm telling you right now, if that was a real insurrection and those were real people and real people who were really pissed off, let me tell you, it wouldn't have looked anything like that. They created their own little fucking insurrection. They created this complete and utter fiction. And we've seen it again and again and again. And what they do with these fictions is that they will use the momentum to try to shift, alter, invert, and distort reality, so-called reality, and put a new kind of story or new narrative on top of the previous one. And then we have to begin to, live through, that version of so-called reality. They do this again and again and again and again, over and over and over. And how many times have they done this since 9/11/2001? Plenty. 9/11 was just the kickoff, right? That was the big spectacle that got people indoctrinated into this new recycling of reality trauma, the restaging of events, so that people over a period of time can be completely and utterly re-engineered, that their thinking has changed, their emotions are changed, their psychology has changed, and then you add in all the variants that go along with it, including, but not exclusively, connected to things like intersectionality, critical race theory, social Marxism. It's all part of a much larger program. So the idea here is to understand it, to see it, to kind of call it out for what it is. And what happens after that is like, okay, well, I've woken up now. Now what do I do when I've woken up? Well, now here we go into kind of understanding the plasticity of reality. Now it's up to you to kind of recraft your own relationship. Now, in order to do that, we have to be able to move through emotional states, whatever they are. And even I've had to kind of move through certain emotional states post-election. And because, and I haven't really said this in a way that you would actually know it, but I'm really fucking pissed off about what happened with the election. I'm like furious, but I've been sort of working with it in a way that is not as volcanic. Okay. I've been doing my best to sort of cycle through this and get to a point where I'm using that event as a certain type of energy versus that energy using me. So, here we are. We're trying our best. We're doing our best to move through things and unhook from certain emotional, sort of looking for anchors and not positive emotional anchors. And when we can do that, then we can level up and we can begin to look around and say, all right, how do we navigate through this now? How do we use this idea that reality is really plastic, that we're living in sort of a virtual environment? And I think when we understand that and really get it, then we can level up and start really cooking with gas, because that's where it's going to be at. That's how we're going to get through this. But we all have to have this relationship with being able to tap into that, to tap into something that's sort of third dimensional. And we can. And we see it all the time. It happens all the time. We have quantum entanglement. We have synchronicities. We have prophetic dreams. We have the beginnings of kind of these collective minds that are kind of merging, like on this channel and other channels. There are some interesting things happening that aren't going to make the headlines of the New York Times. They're not going to make CNN or Fox or any of that stuff. And they're even trans-political. They're beyond the political mind. So this, if we're looking for things that we can kind of put our tractor beam on, this is the reality, or this is a version of the new reality. And for many people, that this world or this realm is something completely new, right? You've gone through the red pilling, you've gone through however you've gotten here. Well, instead of being black pilled, which is, oh my God, there's no hope, and we're gonna drift into this existential void and just renounce everything. And that's a strategy for some people. But to me, that's a cul-de-sac. That's Jean-Paul Sartre. No, there's another level here, and it's the pill that's not a pill. Okay, I want to leave you on something really cool. Okay, really cool. And this has to do with a cafe in Manchester. Now, the reason why I'm going to show you this video is because in a lot of ways, it is an example of what I'm talking about. I want you to notice, number one, sort of the nonchalance, the natural attitude, the sense that these people are, in a lot of ways, creating their own reality without friction or tension. Okay? I'm going to show you this. And it's not something that is, out of the matrix. This is not Neo taking down any version of Mr. Smith. These are regular people in a familiar setting, reminding these bots of authority about who they are and what's important with life. Here we go.
Sorry, I've got it. Very Richard. Who's that guy chatting to? You're in there now, though.
That's up to you. This is people, that's all three people. That's three business.
Are you on your oath? Are you on your oath?
No, we just ban everything.
No, are you on your oath? You're a police constable or officer?
Like you say, we're
You on your oath then, yeah?
trying to support yourself.
You're here to protect us, yeah?
The courts will decide.
Sorry?
What are you going to do?
Well, no, just asking. That's all asking. And who's this gentleman?
I'm from the council.
And your name?
Steve Titterton.
Excuse me?
Steve, you want to step back a bit? Because
Well, you're wearing a mask, so you're not gonna pick up anything as far as you're concerned.
so you know you
There you go.
£100 fine.
Sorry?
You know you could be issued a
I'm a bit
£10
deaf, so I can't hear you without the mask on. Okay. Bye-bye. By the way, guys, the police constables are here both on their oath, so they're here to protect us and not the council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, police constables. Whoa! Thank you, police officers. Maybe a nice coffee for the officers.
All right. That's, you got to love that on so many levels. They were just nonchalant. Hold on 1 second. They were just nonchalant, not a care in the fucking world. And you had the guy who was dealing with the dude from the council, that drone, that bot. And then at the end, they were affirming that the constables were there to protect them. And they gave them this, really warm, enthusiastic, emotional support. Let's buy them a coffee, right? And then there was that one scene where the woman was chatting with the other woman, even though she had the mask on. And you could tell, right, that there is, a spiritual and emotional connection there. And those people were creating their own reality. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to that guy. I don't know what's going to happen with him in the courts, but for that moment in that day, right, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. You create this alternative reality, which is what they were doing. And it's nothing more than like what they're used to. Nothing more than what they're used to, but that in and of itself is a revolutionary act. And I loved that woman. She was just kind of smiling into the camera, right? So I wanted to show that to you because people know how to respond. And they're getting really good at responding in ways in which, in that instance, no conflict. No conflict. You had one woman who was, doing the videotaping on her phone. And then it's so funny. The guy tells her to step back and she says, well, you're the one that's wearing a mask. You're protected. And then he says something else and she says, I can't hear you. I'm partially deaf. you have that mask on. And then he walks away, right? Chases him out. Anyway, I wanted to show you that video because these things are possible. Not only are they possible, they're essential. They're essential. As we use things that are very similar to us, we know what to do, we know how to relate. And in fact, it's even more important now to be able to do those things and do them in a way that is a revolutionary act in the face of this medical tyranny. So a little bit of hope. A little bit of hope and a little bit of quote unquote normalcy in the storm. Okay, let's see where we are. I got to go into the void. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sabrina C says Austrian police also sided with the protesters instead of oppressing them. Yeah, they cannot enforce their petty mandates if their quote unquote police force or security or whomever will not support them. Now, some of them will. Some of them will. Some of them are just absolute sociopaths who are trying to move up the sociopathic ladder, and others won't. So that's a really good point. Can't believe how many small businesses rolled over this BS. Time to stand up peacefully. Absolutely. There's your model right there. And if everybody in a town did that, what would they be able to do? Nothing. Nothing. But we're a year into this now, and people's psychology and mentality has been altered. Let's see. A real insurrection involves body bags. Yeah, I mean, if that was real, if that was a real insurrection, I'm telling you right now, it would have looked nothing like that. Would have looked nothing like that that para-theater. Let's see. They're making examples out of those resisting the mandates. See here for sure. Yeah, so they'll do that. They'll selectively do that. But if enough people did it and continue to do it, then they would have less of an opportunity to make examples of. Just look at Newport Beach or look at Huntington Beach. They're still standing strong in the face of all this because they're united in their intent. Remember that they're united in their intent. And they have the right people inside of city government, the right people in terms of the sheriffs, right? So that's really important. Really important. The mindless order followers. Well, they're NPCs, or in many cases they're unsouled beings, and they become these vessels for the Matrix to occupy them. And that's how it works. They'll wake up when it's too late. A lot of these people who are getting vaccinated are going to have some very interesting reality checks in about 5 to 6 months. I guarantee you on that. Let's see. The Patterson-Gimlin film was more real than the Capitol insurrection. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that film, but whatever it is, I can tell you that it's more real. The Super Bowl was more real than that. That's saying something. Okay. Pakistani health minister, take the vaccine at your own risk. Yep. J&P Love says, but will they be tied back to the vaccine? No, they won't. No, that will be the new outbreak. Guarantee you, that'll be the new outbreak. So you have to kind of, again, think about that, wrap your head around that, and then navigate through that thing. This is where we are right now. Okay. Andrew Bartzis says that after the second jab, many will depart from this world with another strain. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. I think that's pretty clear. Once you understand the mRNA function, which is supposedly to create your own immunity at all times, to have your own little vaccine factory in your RNA. Once you understand that, then you understand the ramifications of that. Most people don't. Most people have no idea what they're doing and signing up for. Okay, I'm out of here. Thanks for being here. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame as we begin to make the transition into another format, another medium, which I'm working on. So you know the drill. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to say what's possible. You guys are amazing. Best chat group, best chat community by far on YouTube. Switched on, loyal, tenacious. You guys are true spiritual warriors. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye for now.